we are going live. I'm going to take us. Hello, David. That was a bit clumsy, but I think we're here. I was just showing the distressed lorikeet. Playing that again. Now that's pretty distressing for those of us that are familiar with the lorikeet. David Phalen, Professor at University of Sydney in Animal Health. Thanks for joining us, David. What's happening to that poor little fella?
All right. Well, what we're studying and is being supported by Wires financially is a disease in rainbow lorikeets that is a seasonal disease. It's called lorikeet paralysis syndrome, and a syndrome implies that we don't fully know what causes it. And our study is an attempt to determine what causes it. That segment of that video was provided to us by Claude Lacasse, who's a veterinarian at the RSPCA in Brisbane. And what she has been seeing over many years and what we've known about for many years is that between October and June, but predominantly between December and February, we have rainbow lorikeets that are found by members of the public that have a disease of their neurologic system that prevents them from being able to fly and walk. And in the most extreme cases, they're completely paralyzed and they can't even stand up. So we grade them from a level 1 to 4, with level 1 being the most severe and level 4 being the least severe. And that was a level 2 lorikeet that, as you could see, was barely able to stand up, be able to move around. Level 1 lorikeets are flat out, literally flat out, and they are found on the ground, unable to move, unable to blink, unable to swallow, and all of them have a voice change. And they're brought into care, and based on our previous studies, we know that the most of these, if treated aggressively, will recover from this, but it takes several weeks for them to get back to a point where they can feed themselves and care for themselves, and then it takes many more weeks in care for them to regain their strength and ability to fly and be fit enough to be released back out to the wild.
Now, I've got a photo that you provided to me, which was that's the Ficus macrophylla, I think, which is the Port Jackson.
Fig.
Oh, the weeping fig, not the Port Jackson fig.
Well, it's also said it's called. I'm sorry, curtain fig or Port Jackson fig. That's right. Yes.
Okay. So, well known to people as a botanical garden specimen, and lots of them in Brisbane and Sydney, northern New South Wales, of course, because they grow so well there. Now, you've sent me that because there's a. Is it a concurrent disease in flying foxes? Is it a separate disease, or are the two of them linked? What's the current thinking?
Okay, so it's a very complicated situation that we're in right now, and I'll do my best to fill you in. So what we're trying to do is determine what the cause of lorikeet paralysis is, and to do that we are approaching it from multiple different angles, and uh, we're hoping that all three of our current investigations will allow us to identify the cause of lorikeet paralysis. And in our original study, we found that there was no evidence that this was an infectious disease or that this was caused by injury. And we also looked for a number of different toxins that might cause it, and didn't find any toxins that would be associated with human activities. For instance, there was no evidence of pesticides in these lorikeets. And we've also looked for evidence of botulism, or that they might be eating a fruit that's fermented that would cause them to have alcohol toxicity. So what we're doing now on three different fronts is first of all we've got a citizen science project going, where we've got over 100 citizen scientists who are checking to see what plants the lorikeets are feeding on, and with the hope that we might be able to find plants that they're feeding on during the times of the year when this disease occurs, and that are different from the times of the year when this disease does not occur. And that will help us to focus on plants. And we think that there is a toxin, possibly a toxin in some of these plants, that is causing this lorikeet paralysis. Now, that toxin could be a toxin that's produced in the plant naturally, or it could be a toxin that is the result of a fungus that's growing on that plant, or we're even taking into consideration the possibility that the toxin might be coming from an insect or a spider that's living in that plant. And when the birds eat it, they ingest the insect or the spider, and then they're getting poisoned by that. So the first step for us to try to figure out how that's happening is to get citizen scientists and people out there in the community to make observations about what the lorikeets are feeding on, and then to record those observations in iNaturalist. The second step in our study is to look at the droppings from lorikeets with lorikeet paralysis and find out what they've recently eaten. And we're working with investigators at Griffith University and at the University of Queensland, who have developed a technology where they can extract DNA from their droppings and then determine what all the plants are that they've been feeding on. And then lastly, what we're doing just recently, we've got this started, is we're working with a biologist who is able to map the plant distribution versus where the lorikeets are coming in, and to help us to see if we can correlate plant distribution with the lorikeet paralysis distribution, and then maybe come up with an idea that way of which plants they're feeding on, and that will help us. But in the process of doing this, what's come out is that last year, and now occurring again this year, we've had flying foxes that are coming in with very similar signs to what's happening in the lorikeets. And so we are also using those same technologies to look at the droppings of the flying foxes, and to see if they may be feeding on certain particular plants that may be uh,
That would be
causing this,
common.
and that we may be able to find the plants that the flying foxes are feeding on,
Yeah,
and if they overlap what the lorikeets are feeding on, then we may be able to help narrow it down even further.
yeah. There's a lot of data matching needing to be done, isn't there, David? The biologist that is sort of mapping where plants occur, is that using an existing plant mapping project, or is somebody going out to locations and then identifying and mapping plants? Which one happened first, the plant map or or the or the biologist going out to identify where the lorikeets have been
Well, we've
reported
been
ill?
contacted by this biologist, and he is, has done a lot of work for councils and other people previously. And as it turns out, plants are considered to be assets
Yeah,
by
yeah,
all of the various councils, and they know where every tree is in
yeah,
their
that they
council.
own. Yeah, the reason I asked is I worked on, it's many years ago now. It's probably 20 years ago. I worked on a project like that at University of Melbourne, and then that spilled out to working on other sites where we were doing that GIS, locating the plants, identifying what they didn't know was in their garden beds, and then trying to get a standing value of the trees. So yeah, so I was just interested that that data obviously exists. So it's a matter of putting the occurrences of ill lorikeets and ill flying foxes on top of that and looking for patterns and matches.
That's correct, and it's fantastic in this day and age how many data sets are out there, how many data sets are available uh, in the public domain, and with the current uh, technology that we have, to being able to manage these large data sets and to use this geospatial mapping, that there's just it provides a tremendous and very powerful tool for us to do disease investigation when we think that there is a geospatial component to it. So it's very exciting. Anyway, the reason for that particular picture is that our preliminary data that we've gotten back from our rainbow lorikeets looking at their poo is that we have found in the majority of the lorikeets that we've looked at, which is only 9 so far, we're going to be looking at a lot more over the coming months, that they've all been eating figs prior to the onset of this lorikeet paralysis. And
And for
so
anyone, sorry to interrupt you there, David, but for anyone who doesn't actually know about the anatomy of a fig is fairly hollow. So apart from being tasty fruit food, uh, certainly for bats and probably lorikeets as well, the chances of ingesting insects as well that they probably didn't mean to eat is pretty high if they're feeding on fig.
that's right. And there's a couple of wasps that specifically parasitize the figs that they could ingest. There's also the possibility that there could be spiders on the outside. And one of the things that we're looking into now, of course, is that in the Brisbane area, there's been the introduced fire ant, and the fire ant has is spreading and is found in various places, and they do climb trees and they feed on fruit as well. And so we're going to be looking at the distribution of where fire ants have been found in Brisbane and compare that to what we're seeing with flying foxes and lorikeets. So there's a whole bunch of different possibilities that we're investigating, but by doing this, I think over time we will be narrowing it down, and hopefully some patterns will start to emerge.
So there's two things I'm curious about, David, with the records that you've been able to get so far from vets who are letting you know that they're treating animals. Is is it increasing in occurrence? Do you know, and or do you think? 'Cause we don't know anything yet, really, do we? And is it more prevalent in the lorikeets or in fruit bats?
Well, the fruit bat situation has only been occurring that we know of for 2 years. Last year was a bad year, and there were many hundreds of fruit bats that were affected. We were notified by some diagnostic people in Queensland that it appeared to be recurring again this year, and we put together a team of people from. Well, this team has been driven by Wildlife Health Australia, who have a bat research group and a coordination group whose main focus is to identify problems that are occurring in bats and then respond to them. And so Wildlife Health Australia has uh, has been driving this, and we have put together this really fantastic team of diagnostic scientists, ecologists, and scientists that are able to analyze DNA and droppings. And that first batch of droppings is being run in this coming week. So we're hoping to get some really good data back straight away. But what we know is last year was bad for flying foxes, and that quite a few flying foxes had this disease. But last year was the first year that it had been really recognized. This year it's occurring again. Whether it's occurring in the same number or less, we're not 100% sure. We know that thousands, literally thousands, 2,000, 3,000 rainbow lorikeets have been coming in consistently year after year for the past 5 or 6 years at least, and maybe a lot longer than that. And that this year is as bad or worse than what we've seen in the past.
And is the geographic area that the lorikeets are being affected, is that growing year on year, or is it staying fairly localized?
That's a hard one for me to answer. We know that the area around Brisbane CBD, to the south of it, west a little bit, and then it's up into the Noosa area, is an area that year after year after year we see these lorikeets coming in, and that those areas haven't changed, and there's still a major problem in that area. About 2 or 3 years ago, we had I think it extended further south into northern New South Wales. My data suggests that it may still be occurring there this year, but maybe not to the same extent that we've seen it there in the past. So it's a big area around Brisbane and up to Noosa, in that general area where it occurs all the time. I think in some years it may expand and be more extensive and maybe extend more into northern New South Wales. But it may not be always as severe in northern New South Wales and as consistent in northern New South Wales as what we're seeing in southeast Queensland.
So if somebody wants to report a sighting of a struggling bird, or obviously if they find one or a bat, they take it to their local vet without question.
Yeah, so these birds, if they're not provided with care, will die. So if you're in the Brisbane area, the RSPCA has people that will come out and pick up those birds from you. If you're in an area where there's the RSPCA doesn't cover, then you should contact a local wildlife care organization. In northern New South Wales, you can contact Wires, and then there's others as well in that area. And if you're unable to get help through that, I know the Australian Zoo is taking these birds, and there are local veterinarians that will also care for wildlife. The Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary on the Gold Coast is also taking these birds as well. So there's quite a few places that will take them. If you can't find a wildlife care care organization, or the RSPCA doesn't respond to you, then you can contact your local veterinarian. If they're not able to take them, they would know somebody that will.
Okay, and the citizen science portal, is there somewhere that people can volunteer, be involved?
Absolutely. So the best way to find that is to type into your Google search or whatever search that you use, University of Sydney lorikeet paralysis syndrome, or even just University of Sydney lorikeet, and that will take you to our webpage. and it will give you links to iNaturalist where you can go and join our project.
And of course, I'll put the relevant link in the material afterwards when this is out in the socials. David, it seems like a sensible time to give the public service announcement that if you are feeding birds, feeding wildlife, you need to keep those areas that they come in contact with clean, because we don't know how this is transmitted really, and there are all sorts of other avian diseases that can be passed at feeding stations. So if I'm telling someone to wipe down their feeders and their balcony rails and anywhere else, or the tables that the birds are congregating on, what should they clean them with, David?
Well, we think that the best disinfectant to start with is just elbow grease. So get a little bit of detergent, something that you would clean your kitchen counter with, and get all the organic material off. That's the key. Any poop or leftover food, any fecal material, that all needs to be removed straight away. If you want to further disinfect, then any phenolic type disinfectant that's like pine sol or something like that would be very effective. You can use pretty much anything that you use on the kitchen counter. 5% bleach solution is a great disinfectant as well. So you can take your bleach that you would use to bleach your clothes and put 1 cup of that into 4 liters of water. Mix that up, and then use that on a surface that you've already disinfected or already cleaned, and that's very effective. And then after it's sat there for about 10-15 minutes, you want to rinse it off. Make sure with fresh water. Make sure that there's no residual detergent or disinfectant present on that surface.
Terrific. Well, I think we've given the right message out there for anybody, because it is obviously a joy to have wildlife in your garden, but when there are diseases that are possibly highly transmissible, we need to do the right thing by taking care of them and the surfaces that they come in contact with.
And I'm just going to reiterate, there are a lot of infectious diseases out there that we need to be concerned about, but the lorikeet paralysis syndrome, we are very confident that this is caused by a toxin, and we do not believe that it's transmitted from one bird to the other or from one bat to another. We think that they're ingesting something that's causing it, and it's not an infectious disease.
Oh, that's good news. So you're not seeing it run through colonies of bats or roosting sites of lorikeets unless those individuals are feeding on the same plant material or ingesting the same insects.
That's right.
Okay, so there's some good news. David, just totally off topic, but reminding me, someone tweeted at me yesterday, have you been keeping up with the avian influenza outbreak that's happening in, I think it was in Scotland, and they're seeing a lot of it in seabirds. Have you been alerted to that?
Well, I'm aware of avian influenza and the factors that are associated with it. It does occur in wildlife on a fairly regular basis, and can have significant impacts in them. The circumstances that cause outbreaks in one year compared to the other are quite variable, and I'm not particularly aware of this particular outbreak.
I just wondered if bird health people were talking to each other in the back channels of social media, sort of going, "Gee, look at this! This is unusual."
Well, there are a number of things where we have discussions about these sorts of things, and I'm just not always up to date on all of them. as maybe I should be, because I have jobs like
Well,
teaching students and making
that's
sure they
right.
get they're scheduled properly into their groups and everything. So I might have been on, it might be on the back burner for me right now.
That's right. Of course, you've got nothing else to do, David, except hang out on Twitter. So that's that's right. No, that's kind of the life I lead. I think, David. I see so many of those things, and there's never enough time to follow them all up. So I can't imagine what it would have to what it would be like having to guide the potential careers of a whole lot of would be vets. They're all your students, aren't they, David? They're all
That's
would
right.
be
Yeah.
vets. Yeah, terrific. Well, thanks, David, again for providing us with that update. I hope I can check in with you again, sort of a bit further down the track, and we'll see how the citizen science is progressing, and to see if you've been able to draw any conclusions, or indeed have any treatments or preventions that people need to know about.
Well, I really appreciate you taking your time to allow me to talk to your audience. I have to say that this all the media that's been associated with, and discussions and forums that we've been part of, as part of this lorikeet paralysis syndrome, have just been fantastic, and the community response has been really supportive, and we have been able to identify other investigators that are now part of our team as a result of the work that you've been doing, Grant, and others have been doing. And as a result of all this interest and collaboration, I think we're just making advances and leaps and bounds. And I'm very, very hopeful that this will result in some really good outcomes in the coming year. So thank you
Uh,
very much.
thank you, David. I'm sure that your team and all of the collaborators will get to the bottom of it, and that it'll be one more thing that we don't need to worry about. There's more than enough to worry about when it comes to looking after birds at the moment.
Well, finding solutions is what we're all about, and I think we're headed in that direction. So thanks again.
Thank you, David. Professor David Phalen from the University of Sydney. And look for the links. Google lorikeets, University of Sydney, and David Phalen, and you will find the page, and it'll be all in all of my links and whatnot when I publish this later on. Thanks for those watching. I guess if you've got any questions, you've got one opportunity right now for a minute or two where you can pop one in, or you'll need to chase David up via the lorikeet page that we mentioned. No, all right. Thanks, David. I look
All
forward to
right.
talking to you again the next time we do an update. I'm
Have a
Grant
great
Williams.
day. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.